Awesome. So let's kick it off here. I guess I'm sure people will start pooling in, but thank you all for taking time out of your day to either watch this now or watch a recording of the Mental Health Action Day here at the Sigma Chi fraternity. My name is Bryce Widerski. I'm committee member, Ball State 2021 Epsilon Omega. With me, we have Shelby Mecklenburg, our 37th International Sweetheart, Max Troicki of Hillsdale College as well, and with Nicholas Mancini, the co-owner of Collective Counseling Solutions, who's here to give some insight, answer some great questions, as well as really kind of break down mental health and kind of the resources and the stigmas and how we can collectively, keep moving forward with the conversation. From there, I'll switch it off to Shelby.
All right. Well, hi, everyone. Like Bryce said, my name is Shelby Mecklenburg. And before we get started, I would like to give you all a bit of background for today's events. So 2 years ago today, not today, but 2 years ago, Bryce, Max, and I were placed on the fraternity's Health, Safety, and Wellness Committee. And our discussions led us to the realization of an opportunity that we as a fraternity held to support our communities. Since then, we've been working with undergrads, sweethearts, and alumni to develop what has come to be Mental Health Action Day, or MHAD for short. So we see MHAD being an annual event held in the fall in which chapters are encouraged to host events that spread awareness or somehow start the conversation about mental health in their community. It's well known that Brothers of Sigma Chi are called to be their fellow brother's keeper. Mental Health Action Day challenges members to extend this notion beyond brothers and then to become their community's keeper as well. Local events will be accompanied each year by a keynote speaker selected by the International Fraternity. So to introduce our inaugural Mental Health Action Day speaker, we have committee member Max Troicki.
Hey everyone, thank you again for joining. It's wonderful to have this event finally happen after 2 years of work, and we're just so excited. And we're very grateful to have Nick Mancini here with us today. So Nick is a brother. He graduated from Dayton in 2007 from the Iota Rho, Nick? Is that the chapter?
Iota Theta.
Iota Theta. Okay. It was one away. And he is a licensed professional counselor and a licensed marriage and family therapist. And he is here to give about a 30-minute presentation just on mental health, especially as it relates to kind of the peaks and valleys of college life. Obviously, mental health is something that's relevant to everyone, but sometimes the college and fraternity environment provides a unique challenge to mental health. And Nick is one of the best people you could possibly hear about it from. He's a co-owner of his own business, Collective Counseling Solutions. It's a national collective of skilled clinicians who operate in private practice and share a common value of accepting insurance benefits for mental health treatment. Again, he's a licensed professional counselor, a licensed marriage and family therapist, and he's based out of Denver. And Nick likes to help his clients develop the ability to engage in the present moment, and then they can determine if their behavior is consistent with their values. He's helped countless people to deal with their mental health struggles. He effectively addresses personal life challenges, works with every individual on a personalized basis, builds on values and strength. And some areas of specialty that I'm sure he'll touch on are men's issues, depression, anxiety, self-esteem, substance use, relationship issues, life transitions, and so much more. So it is my privilege and pleasure to introduce Nick Mancini.
Thank you for the introduction, Max. For those watching and watching live, please feel free to ask any questions. I'd prefer this to be interactive, and so if there's pressing questions that you have that I can help answer, please put them in the comments, and we'll address them as they come up. As everyone has shared, I'm in Denver, Colorado right now. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, licensed professional counselor. I've been working in the field for about 10 years. I started in community mental health for an adolescent day treatment program. And so that's a program where teens are struggling in multiple locations. They're struggling at school, at home, and have a wide variety of struggles, from trauma to severe persistent mental health issues, and they're really struggling. And so the day treatment is a more intensive program that allows students to learn some coping skills, get a solid foundation to be able to return back to their public school or wherever they were going, and improve family and friend relationships. So I worked in there for about 7 years, and then I moved into my private practice, where I primarily work with individuals and couples. And that's people who are struggling with anxiety, depression, relationships, friendships, significant life transitions, and then also some more significant issues like suicidality. So I've been in my private practice for a little over 5 years now, and then 4 years ago, I with a colleague of mine created Collective Counseling Solutions. Because we noticed a need where there's a lot of services for people who might be lower income on Medicaid, and there's community mental health resources, and then there's people who are able to that are well resourced and are able to pay privately for mental health services. And so there was a big gap where a lot of people had insurance but were struggling to get connected with providers. And so Collective Counseling Solutions is supporting clinicians to be able to get credentialed with insurance companies so that they can accept insurance benefits from people seeking services, which in turn then increases access to care. And so that was about 4 years ago where that started. And so the main focus that I would like to speak on right now is about access to care, because I think that oftentimes, in private practice, people will outreach me. There's various different directories that people can find clinicians, and I'll respond to somebody who outreaches, and oftentimes the response is, "Oh, thank you. Like I reached out to 10 different people, and you're the first person who's responded," or I'm really having a trouble like finding people who are available or taking my insurance and stuff like that. And so I wanted to, one something like notable that I think happened in the last few years was the pandemic. And there's some pros and cons to the pandemic, and some of the cons are obvious. Like things just shut down. People were feeling isolated. I can't even imagine starting college, remotely. Like that really shifts the experience for many people. And so those were, some obvious cons. Some pros, though, is that it did create an opportunity to normalize telehealth services. And so over the last few years, insurance companies have been reimbursing and supporting telehealth platforms to be able to access services. And so specifically, mental health services have really increased over the last few years because people are able to access them via a telehealth platform or in person, or there's clinicians are able to provide hybrid models. And so the accessibility has really increased. And so with that being said, I wanted to kind of shift into what it's like to kind of go through the process of seeking out services. And, if anybody has any questions or kind of, wonders what's going on, like, or has some experiences, please feel free to put those in the chat. I'd like to, comment on those or address it. But at least from my end, from being a provider, there's a lot of different platforms that you can go and look in and seek professionals. And so I wanted to start with at least like kind of like basic credentials and provide some information around that. And so for mental health providers, everyone needs to have a master's degree. And then after the master's program, they typically have like a minimum of 2 to 3 year supervised period of time where they're working under supervision of a licensed clinician. And this allows them to get experience, get, regular support and consultation, really develop some of the skills now that they are practically applying what they learned in graduate school. And so usually after that period of time, and different states have some different requirements, but generally that's the timeline. Then they're able to apply for their independent license. And so there's typically like 3 different routes. There's a master's in social work, there's a master's in clinical counseling, and a master's in marriage and family therapy, or some version of that. And those lead to the credentials of a licensed clinical social worker, a licensed professional counselor, and a licensed marriage and family therapist. You may wonder, like, what's the difference? And so some of it is about identity, just different ways of kind of the person kind of perceiving and understanding the human experience. There are some different classes that each program has to take, but generally the basic foundations are there, where they're prepared to be able to support individuals, couples, families, and with whatever mental health issues are coming up. And so I just wanted to share some of that, because that's important when you're looking to seek services. Is this person licensed, and what are their credentials? There's also been like a rise in life coaching, and there's value in seeking services in that way. However, they have less training and there's less regulation. And so for more significant mental health issues that come up, like coaches often have to refer to a mental health provider for additional support. So just want to give that background for people, and when you're looking at, and so when you go to like seek services, I would recommend, first, if you have insurance, they're a good resource. You can contact your insurance provider and say, hey, who are providers in my network that I could outreach? And that could be a good start. There's also many different platforms and directories online. And so there's Psychology Today is one of the most prominent ones, where you can go in and you can filter various ways, gender, sex, age, specialties, if they take insurance or not, location, telehealth, or in person. And so that's a solid resource as well. And as a heads up, like, it can be really overwhelming because there's long lists of providers there. And so that's where I would encourage you to have take some time to kind of reflect first on what would be helpful for you, because a lot of the research shows that the therapeutic relationship is one of the most significant indicators of a successful therapeutic treatment. And so what I mean by that is, I could be fantastic at working with people who have chronic suicidality. However, if it's not a good relationship with this person, or maybe we don't have a good fit, it doesn't matter how good I am. It might not work, or the relationship and the communication just might not be, allow for some progress. And so it's important to take some time to reflect on, what is it that you like? What is it where you feel comfortable? Because seeking mental health services ideally provides a safe space for you to go in and be able to share about some of the some intimate feelings, thoughts, behaviors that you're having, and be able to get some guidance around that. And as a therapist, and I tell some of my clients this, that going to a therapist is kind of weird. Like, I'm like, it's kind of like an odd experience, because sometimes the expectation is to go and talk to like a complete stranger about some of your most intimate feelings and thoughts. And that can be really overwhelming and really challenging and scary for people. And so I just want to acknowledge that, there's this process of building trust and making sure that you have a relationship so that it is a good fit and that you feel safe doing that. Because the therapist is also working to get to know you as well. And so it's this kind of give and take. And so I think I wanted to just recognize that it's kind of like a weird thing and it's really helpful. Ideally, I would love for people to have a community of support that allows them to be able to meet these needs that are coming up for them. That's not always the case. There's also value in going to somebody who is unbiased and doesn't necessarily have, you can kind of start with a clean slate and just kind of share what's going on. And so some of those values of engaging services and getting started, that's why I think it's important to take some time to think about what would be helpful for you when you're thinking about engaging with somebody. And also know that if you meet up with somebody for the first time and you're like, I don't think this is a good fit, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to stay with them, just because you connected with them and it's they were available and you were able to set up a time. And if it wasn't a good fit, that's okay. There's other people that you can see and seek out. And so clients, I really want to empower clients, empower people to have choice in the services that they're receiving and being able to communicate what they're wanting and needing. And I think that starts with a little bit of personal reflection on what you're wanting and what you're looking for. And even if it's just a few things, that's important to be able to engage with a clinician and communicate that to them. So then, if anything, they can help get you connected with the right resources. So again, that's just like the engagement. And then the other part of it is reach out. You might have to reach out to like a handful of therapists initially. And so it can be really challenging at times where you're feeling maybe ready to go seek services and it doesn't happen right away. And so I encourage you to reach out to quite a few different therapists and kind of interview them to see about a good fit and stick with it, because I think it's important. My tendency is to I'd rather you be able to get services than to say, shoot, I can't do this anymore. And no one's getting back to me. I'm not going to do this. It can feel discouraging, but there are many different resources out there. Now, for those of you that maybe don't have insurance or need financial assistance to that, because sometimes that can be a barrier. There's another directory that I really like. It's called Open Path Collective. And that is a directory where there's clinicians that have reserved spots on their caseload for a sliding scale fee, where the cost for therapy is reduced and to make it more accessible as well. And so, Psychology Today, Open Path Collective, those are two that I really recommend and I like, at least for getting started, to just see what's out there. Also, if anything, I'm happy to be a resource as well. And so feel free to, you can send out my contact information, and I'm happy to answer questions or help people get connected too. So anyways, that's the initial, I wanted to just share some of the experiences that I've heard from potential clients and people in the field and colleagues. The next thing I want to talk about briefly is just what's it like to, go in for a first session. Oftentimes I get that question, what's that like? And how does this work? And so oftentimes the first session is a get to know you session. There's an intake. And so there's many questions about like history and just getting a background of what's bringing you in. And I think that's also a time for you to ask the therapist, what is their style? What's their approach? And, if there's something that you quite, maybe don't understand, ask them to clarify that. And that helps you understand, their worldview, their perspective, and see if that aligns with what it is that you're looking for and wanting. So, okay. I think I see some chats and comments coming up here. Shelby,
Yeah.
Bright,
Yeah.
joined too. Did you have comments or questions?
Well, we were just going to kind of field some of the questions in here. The first one that I see is, how can fraternities play a role in decreasing the stigma around men's mental health?
Great. It's going to sound like simple, but it's really hard. And that's starting just by communicating about it. I think that in my own experience, even being in a fraternity, just growing up and having different life stages, having a good group of friends where they know me and I know them allows me to be able to communicate about stuff. And I think that it's really cool that Sigma Chi is having this mental health awareness day, and that starts the conversation. And I think that in working with teenagers, and also I work with quite a few like 20-year-olds, early 30-year-olds. A common comment and experience that people have been sharing with me is that like they don't feel like they have close connections or close friendships, or that they don't have anybody that they can talk to about stuff. And for me, I'm like, man, everybody's saying the same thing. And so I think it's probably a lot of people are having a similar experience. It might be different levels of acuity or severity, but a lot of people are experiencing different thoughts, feelings, and emotions. And I think sometimes it just takes one person to start the conversation, to kind of break the ice, to be able to engage in those. I think the other part is that it's challenging. It's hard to have some of these conversations at times, because people are then like, well, shit, what do I do with that? And I think that, again, that's kind of getting stuck in trying to fix something or jump to a solution about something, when most of the time someone just being able to say like, I'm like really depressed, and or I'm super anxious and I'm struggling to know what the hell I want to do with my life, and someone being like, oh yeah, I'm right there with you, like I feel you, like that sucks. That's enough just to be heard and to kind of validate some of those experiences. That can go a really long way.
Yeah, that is absolutely awesome. And I feel like that connects really well. The last question in this chat is, how important is social connection really for mental health? And I think that's kind of the core of everything we're talking about. Lots of mental health issues stem from just feeling alone or feeling invalidated, which is something that happens in college especially. So I wanted to ask a question that was not from the chat, but from an Instagram DM. So this one says, I feel like in college, you're pressured to have the best time of your life, but that wasn't an experience that I got. What is something you could tell a student struggling to grasp this fact? Or what are any words of encouragement to persevere through feeling alone in college?
Sure. I appreciate you sharing that. I'm sorry to hear that, there's this stated expectation or ideal, and it's not your experience. That I think is always a struggle. I certainly am a sucker for that. I hype things up, and then I'm like, oh, I'm super psyched for this. And then like the reality hits, I'm like, oh shoot, like, and disappointment is tough for me to swallow sometimes. And, when I think about my own experiences, there were certain times when I struggled in college as well. I think most of my best friends are from high school. Actually, I grew up in Ohio, went to a small school in Ohio for high school, and had some really good friends that I played soccer with and stuff like that. And we're still really good buddies. And in college, I think it was really, really challenging. I think similarly, I had this experience where like, oh, college is made up to be this. But I found it really difficult at times to connect because people are coming from all over the place, and then there's breaks, and then they all spread out, or you graduate and everybody kind of goes their separate ways. And it's really hard to keep those connections. And so, I think that there, one thing that I've reflected on is like a quantity versus quality. And I know this sounds cliche, and I think it's, what is it that you're looking for? What is it that you're needing? And maybe you have one or two people who are your close friends, and that's what works for you. I think the world is like ripe for comparison, and comparison can get really tricky and become a really slippery slope. I think it's kind of human nature and natural to just kind of like compare things, and experiences. However, that's where identifying what it is that's important to you, and what it means to live like the life that you're wanting to live, and basing your assessment, your evaluation, your comparisons on that versus whatever some of these ideals might be, can help kind of balance that out.
It's great, Nick. Appreciate that response. I think that's very on point. The next question we have is, can you share some signs and symptoms we should look for in brothers who may be struggling with their mental health? I feel like that's really accurate, especially with young adults in college who are kind of figuring out who they are and what their why is. People wear masks at times to kind of give off that everything's okay and things like that. So I guess that's really what are those signs and symptoms that we should look for?
Yeah, I think that I appreciate that you mentioned like people wearing masks and stuff. Everyone's really good at having their own defense mechanisms, and so it's hard to say generally what's one way or the other. I mean, there's some things that you could say like, oh, well, they're isolating, they're really quiet, they're less engaged. Well, what's the difference between that and somebody who might just be more introverted? And so I think that the signs and being able to tell the signs comes from being able to develop those relationships and get to know somebody. And so having those conversations and saying, hey, look, like I've known you for 2 years. This is how we've done some things. I noticed some things are different. What's up with you? Like, I think being proactive with communication helps a lot, because it creates an engagement and a connection with somebody, versus from a distance, I'm looking at this and I'm trying to guess which signs are this or that. And then I think people can maybe feel judged or misunderstood in that way. And so I think I can share some like obvious signs that you could look out for. But I don't know if that's necessarily like what would be my recommended approach, because I would want it to be more engaged in the sense of connecting with someone. And so I think like, if there's like an increase in, this is a hard one to judge, I guess, in college, but like increase in like drug and alcohol use and isolation, maybe like grades are are slipping. Haven't seen people in a long time. Like they're not attending activities. Some of those, dietary and exercise has decreased significantly or shifted. So like some of those like general, like basic, like wellness, like are you taking care of your basic needs, like hygiene stuff? I think those are signs. At the same time, like I said earlier, that could be tricky. I don't know how often college kids shower, but like I would hope it'd be regularly, but again, like if these are people that you care about, it's important to put work into building those relationships and getting to know them and having the conversations and just saying like, hey, I want to check in. Like, can we just like go for a walk and just be like, hey, what's up, man? How are you? Like finding that ways to connect, I think will allow space for you to be able to have some of those conversations. And I think better identify if something has shifted or changed.
I think that really connects well to the question we touched on earlier about how fraternities specifically can be involved in this. And a lot of the time, I think that mental health awareness is seen as this big, like nebulous idea of having to make a huge change on the entire world all at once. But really what happens is that change is made on a personal level. And like you were saying, it's all about the small changes that you see in a person every day. And as fraternity members, you are in a place where you have weekly relationships with these people, if not daily. And so you really are in an awesome spot to be able to monitor these things and take care and pay attention. And so just serving as a reminder that change is done on a personal level. And that's really where Sigma Chi falls into this with Mental Health Action Day, is being able to monitor those close to you and like taking your community in and being aware of changes within those that you're close with.
Yeah. And, one thing that I think about specifically for fraternities, sororities, really any like kind of group, but I think specifically for fraternities, one thing that I think is near and dear to me that I really enjoy is rituals. And so I like rituals, I like traditions. And so what's cool about a fraternity is that there is ritual. There is time to gather. There's intentional time and space to kind of talk about, hey, we're doing fraternal activities. We're focusing this. And I think that's something that's a space that could be that you could incorporate some of what we're talking about today about mental health and checking in is, hey, look, we're doing a ritual right now, and this is our safe space. This is unique to us, to our fraternity. And it's important for us to take care of our brothers. And so I want to dedicate some time to just checking in and doing this. And I think that to me is like one of the first things that comes to mind, because in my experience in the fraternity, I really liked the ritual time because of that. It was a sacred time, and it was special, and it was a safe time for everybody to kind of gather and talk about what's going on. And so that's what comes to my mind as far as what Sigma Chi could encourage.
Yeah, I think that all of that makes a lot of sense, especially given the power of the ritual and kind of how fraternity men are uniquely positioned to use that and leverage it positively. And building off of that whole line of thought, I kind of have a two-pronged, because this has been a really good thread, is obviously this is what we're doing internationally, and you spoke to the ritual and its utility in this. Do you have any other insights or ideas about other regular practices, maybe not even necessarily ritualistic, but things that chapters can do during chapter to support each other's mental health? And then I think we had another earlier question, just because I don't want to lose that conversation about, some of those negative signs, maybe some of those maladaptive coping mechanisms like increased substance use, isolation. If you could speak a little bit more on the individual level about the connection between those good habits, right? The exercise, diet, sleep, all of those ramifications on mental health for young men. So I know I gave you a lot there, but
Let's see. Where would you like me to start?
dealer's choice.
Okay. So, I think like every chapter and university is probably unique and has a different setup. Where when I was at Dayton, I think our chapter house only had like 12 brothers that lived in it, and then everybody else kind of lived around. And so it wasn't like I think what maybe some people experience at like larger schools where it's like you're part of a fraternity and everybody lives in a fraternity house. And so, I think that there, again, kind of leaning on to like the social connections and relationships part of it is, do some people kind of take the lead in organizing certain activities or habits? And so, for example, like I think one, this is even with like some of my best friends. I recently went on like a golf trip with them. One of my buddies, like a couple years ago, was like, we should do a golf trip. And then like for 6 months, he just went silent. And I was like, dude, I want to do a golf trip with you all and I want to go and hang out. And he didn't plan anything. And so there has to be one person at least, that has to organize and plan it. And I think identifying roles is really important within friend groups, within yourself, and what your needs. Some people are really good at certain things. And so, if there's some people that really like exercising and they have a good system, like maybe they just kind of say like, hey, look, here's my schedule. Here's my routine. I'm happy to help out anybody who shows up, and I'm going to be here. I'm going to be there. Like that makes a huge difference, because then people can just kind of show up and get that started. If someone likes cooking or, has, like a certain diet routine that they're following, like just offer that up and see that. I think one of the challenges in the field, and this is something that I've kind of learned over time, is that like I don't have any power or control over other people to do anything. If I did, my practice would be like a line out the door, and sessions would be like 5 minutes or less. And I would just be knocking it out. I'd be like, well, do this, do this, do this. And everyone would be good. But everybody is kind of in their own space and in their own process. And so it's about creating like the opportunities, having some consistency and routine, and it allows people to then show up and do it. And so I don't know if I fully answered the question or not, but let me know if any feedback would be helpful.
I think you did. I think you really tied both of those into one. And I can speak from personal experience when I say, those habits like going on a run or going and getting, not getting Taco Bell and actually getting the guys together and cook. I think so much of those things are reinforced by getting everyone involved and making it a united front. And then speaking to that accountability as well, I think that's a super important component. And when that is a burden shared among people, rather than all of that being on one person, I think it makes it a much more manageable thing to achieve. So you answered it perfectly. Thank you.
All right, our next question is actually about BetterHelp. So for those that are not super up to date on that, because I know it's a little bit of a newer venture, Sigma Chi has this great partnership with BetterHelp where we get discounted rates, and it's available to everyone. But Nick, I'm curious how you see virtual therapy fitting into just the grand scheme of things, and when would be a good situation to use these services, if there's any specific ones, or just kind of how you see virtual therapy fitting in.
Sure. So like I said at the very beginning, like I think the pandemic was really helpful because it just boosted mental health access, and I think it slowly started to reduce some of the stigma, because people started feeling more comfortable accessing mental health services. And also like what I said earlier, it it can be super weird to like go in and meet some like random person and be like, all right, I'm going to tell you about like a whole bunch of shit that's going on in my life right now. And you don't know me and I don't know you. And so let's hope for the best, like, so I think the virtual therapy has created a little bit of a ease to like access mental health. My bias is that like I like doing a hybrid. I like being able to meet people in person. I think when you can only see like the shoulders up, you miss out on a lot of like nonverbal communication, and then there's just something about that you can't like really recreate that well when you're in the presence of somebody else. And also, there's some clients that like I go for a walk with them. I take them for a walk. I'm like, hey, like you're really like raging right now, and let's go for a walk and just kind of talk it out in that way. And so I think that there are limitations with virtual therapy where you can't maybe kind of do many audibles, depending on what the need is. However, it provides like an entrance into it. It can get you started. And so if you're questioning it, and if you just have a thought like, oh, I should go talk to somebody, then just go talk. Then that's enough. Just try it out. Again, like it doesn't mean that you're committing to like weekly therapy for like 4 years. Like that would be ridiculous, and so if you're questioning it, it's important for you to just go and explore and check it out. And again, experiment with it to see what works, what doesn't work, because maybe you do virtual and you utilize this resource as a way to just kind of say like, hey, I'm going to ease into this. Like here, I have some stuff going on with school. I'm having some relationship struggles, like whatever it might be. I'm going to, start with those. And then you get to see what it's like, because I've gone to therapy myself, and there's been a couple people that I'm like, oh yeah, I'm not gonna go back and see you again. Like it was just like a weird experience, and so I think I maybe had like a little bit of an advantage because I was studying to be a therapist, and so I felt comfortable just being like, yeah, this isn't a good fit, so I'll see you later. But there's plenty of times that people just like ghost me. They'll be like, yep, I'm out. And I'm like, okay, I hope you get services, Anyways, I share all that to say like, if you're even considering it, or if you're curious about it and you have this resource that gets you some discounted services, try it out just to see what it's like. And don't set your expectations like, oh yeah, I'm going to go meet this person and everything's going to be great immediately. Like, nope, just set them as like, I'm going to try and see what this looks like and see who it is. Because again, like I could meet with one client and they're like, wow, this is a great fit. And the next person could be like, you're super weird, man. I don't want to go to you. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. Like I might not have done anything different. It's just the therapeutic relationship, the fit isn't there.
Yeah, I think that's like you were saying, it's a great intro to things just to test it out. And I feel like BetterHelp is a really underutilized resource that we have as a fraternity. And it's available to alumni, to undergrads, to sweethearts. So if you have any questions about getting started on that, you can DM the Sigma Chi Instagram and there can be more details put your way. But like Nick was saying, it's just a good starter source. And yeah, it's available to everyone. So give it a try.
We have another really good question that relates to the kind of whole discussion about BetterHelp and just going to therapy in general. And that's from the more clinical side of things. But Nick, speaking to how often do you in your practice turn to medication as a solution? And then I think another component of that is, I feel as though, and I've observed this directly in my life and people I know, I feel like taking medication is something that's often stigmatized, especially in the realm of mental health. It's not a somatic illness. It's not something you can visibly see that's going on, but you still have to take medication for it, which is perfectly reasonable. So how do we destigmatize that, and how often do you employ that in your practice as you treat various things and manage things?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, as therapists, we're not medical doctors, so we're actually not able to prescribe medication. And so, um, oftentimes when I'm meeting with somebody, we talk about, or what are some treatment goals? Where are you right now, and where would you like to be, and how's that going? And if after a period of time, like hasn't been much change, or it's kind of stalling out, I tend to have a pretty frank conversation and say, "Hey, so how's like exercising? How's diet? How's sleep? How's reduction of like substance use or whatever it might be? Like how's hanging out with friends or doing these other activities?" And sometimes people are like, "I haven't really been that consistent with it." And I'm like, "Okay, well, let's get consistent with it and then see what happens." And then they're like, "Okay, I've been consistent with it and I haven't really had any changes." Well, then what I often recommend, I said, "Well, I recommend a consult with your primary care physician, or maybe a psychiatrist, to discuss what's going on and what are some options for medication." And then oftentimes the therapists, they can get a release of information and consult with the med provider to talk about what's going on. Say, I've been working with this person for 6 months. Here's what I've observed. Here's what I've seen. This is why we're reaching out to you to talk about this as an option. And so that can be that's a common practice of just ways to like integrate medication management into it. And so it's certainly not my go-to, because I'm not able to do that. Also, a lot of, like, as you mentioned, Max, like there's a lot of stigma around it, and there's not a lot of like negativity. And I think to that point is, if people have diabetes, they take their insulin. If you have depression, like there's hormones and things that are going off, that you take this medication and it helps level you out. Similar process, and if it helps you, great, and sometimes the medication process can be a pretty like tedious one. Often I think that's what the deterrent is that it's not like, here, you take this medication for depression and everybody takes that medication. Like there's, people respond and react differently to it. And so there's this trial and error process with medication that just can be grueling. And that can be, I think that's where I think some of the negative stigma comes up around that. And they're like, I hate these side effects. This sucks. And now I have to try another one. And then it's like, all of a sudden it's a 9-month process. And you're like, I think I finally found one that is kind of working, And so it's, again, it's kind of setting expectations and being informed going in and saying, all right, I want to try this, and let's try this process. I think like there's very few like immediate like solutions and immediate fixes in our world, and I wish there were more immediate fixes, but with most things, it takes time, and it takes a process. And I think when we're talking about mental health treatment, it's identifying, okay, what's the life that you want to live? What's it look like? What would you be doing? And developing those habits over a long period of time, so that you can look back and be like, look, I'm living my life like this, and this, and I'm feeling solid about it. If we just kind of focus on like surface level fixes, then it's a little bit harder it just kind of feels like Band-Aids, and it doesn't get to that kind of the root of some of the things that are going on.
Yeah, I really appreciate you saying that. I think it's valuable insight. And I spent a little bit of time doing my medical school rotations on clinical psychiatry. And I can tell you how valuable therapy is for patients. And just, I think what you vocalized there was something that's very important about this process. And it goes back to the overarching theme of no one's in this alone. When you as the therapist liaise with the primary care provider, with the psychiatrist, it makes it interdisciplinary. It makes it collaborative. And it makes it so much more likely that someone is going to get help with all dimensions of whatever they're going through. So thank you for sharing that.
No, that's great. I guess my question that I have here, reading in from, is, your collegiate experience with Sigma Chi. How did that kind of have an effect on, going into your practice, or kind of being able to have that camaraderie with your brothers, and being that, like, speaking about the ritual, like having that connectiveness and kind of being there with one another? How was that experience, and how did that kind of shape you, after college?
Yes. So I have, I think when I was in undergrad, it was really helpful to, this is probably clear in what I've been talking about, to have that social connection piece, and have that, have a group. And I think that I had friends outside of the fraternity, that, I enjoyed, I played like club lacrosse, and I'd have like lacrosse guys. I'd just have, different things I was a part of that, I'd build these relationships. But being part of Sigma Chi, I think the experience that I take away from that is the intentionality, is that being able to be part of a group that had intentional practices and time to build connections with people, where to me, the takeaway is how important it is for me to build social connections with depth. And so, and that requires having regular meetups with people, having conversations about real topics and who we want to be and what we want to do. And I think that's something that I gained from Sigma Chi and continue to take with me, is that being part of the fraternity and that experience in undergrad just validated how important it is to have these intentional times, to have a common shared value system that helps like promote exploration of your own individual identity and where you'd like to move forward.
Well said. That was awesome there, Nick.
Awesome. Well, we are going to end up with one more question that was from Instagram, but it's just generally, what does the future of Mental Health Action Day look like, just in years to come? So I'll go ahead and take this one, Nick. But this year is obviously our inaugural year, and like anything else, we're starting to just be where it can be and pushing for it to grow. But eventually we see this becoming a part of Sigma Chi, the way that Derby Days is a part of Sigma Chi, just as ingrained in the fraternity, because it's just as important. And instead of focusing on the fundraising aspect, it would be more about combining the efforts of the chapter and their community and the international fraternity to raise awareness about mental health. So this could look like hosting a workshop with chapter members, or tabling on campus and passing out notes of encouragement, or partnering with sororities to make wellness baskets for a donation. Really just anything you can think of to connect with the community. So we actually have a really great list of ideas in our MHAD guide, our Mental Health Action Day guide, that is online. So I'd encourage everyone to give that a look on the Sigma Chi website. But overall, what we need most is the support of everyone tuned in right now. We need undergrads, alums, and sweethearts to help make this day their own and engaged with their chapters in all the years to come. So we all know that this is a worthy cause, and we all know that we need to work together to get its feet off the ground and reach its potential. But yes, if you have a chance, check out that Mental Health Action Day guide. And we really appreciate you joining in with us. And we appreciate you, Nick, for the time that you've taken to speak with everyone.
Thank you.
And just to say a few final things, Shelby, Bryce, and I have been working on this with a lot of people for 2 years now. Just to reiterate what Shelby said, obviously it's wonderful. We got the international thing. We got the rollout. We hope it'll be a fixture of fraternity programming for years to come. But this really amplifies in power and impact when you guys take it back home to your chapters, and you take it to your alumni, and you take it to your sweethearts, and you take it to your other Greek organizations on campus. and to your friends who aren't Greek, and each and every person in your life. So we hope that you'll use those resources that have been created for you, and that mental health will not just be a focus of the annual Mental Health Action Day, but something that's always in the forefront of your mind. We always talk in Sigma Chi about how we're leaders of men, and we want to be the example. And we are leaders in a lot of domains, and we hope that this will be one of the next focus points for how Sigma Chi can lead the charge and destigmatize and make college, fraternity experience, and life in general just a happier and healthier place, both physically and mentally. So once again, thank you so much to Nick for his generosity of time and his insight and wisdom. Thank you to Shelby and Bryce, who carried the lion's share of the burden here, to Leslie, Ryan, everyone else at HQ that helped with the marketing of all this, and to all of you for being vulnerable and being willing to participate. And we're so grateful for it and very excited to see how this continues to evolve.